As any Blender editor, you can navigate in the timeline using your middle mouse. You can move selected items by pressing G. You can scale them using S, which will push them further from the playhead, but pressing R won't rotate the keyframe. What it will do instead, it will allow you to change the keyframe type. Changing the keyframe type won't affect your animation. It's only a visual modification of your keyframes that may allow you to betterly organize your animation. I personally never use it in production. Pressing the 0 key on the numpad will center your timeline position around the playhead. When you have some keys selected, pressing the dot key on the numpad will frame or focus the selection. Pressing the home key will frame the whole animation from the very first to the very last keyframe. You can preview a part of your animation by pressing P and dragging and hold on the section you want to repeat. Press Alt P to clear the preview. You can activate the preview range by clicking the clock icon and then setting the starting and ending frame. You can set the beginning of your animation pressing Ctrl Home, and you can set the end by pressing Ctrl End. When you activate the preview range with the clock icon, using Ctrl Home and Ctrl End will set the beginning and the end of the preview range. My timeline here is just showing me the keyframe of the selected items. If I go into View and uncheck only keyframes from selected object, every keyframe in the scene will be displayed. My character currently have a subdivision modifier. If I go to the rendering properties, I can see that Simplify has been activated. It allows you to disable every subdivision modifier in the scene, increasing the playback performances. When deactivated, we can see that my frame range in the top left corner turned to red, meaning that Blender is not able to reach the frame rate I've set previously. While this scene is supposed to run at 30 frames per second, here I'm below 14 frames per second. While it is not optimal, Blender allows us to drop frames so that we have a better timing of the animation, meaning that it will drop some of the frame to make sure that the action runs at the same speed as if we were displaying the 30 frames per second. To allow this, just go to the playback option to the no sync and choose whether frame drop or AV sync. We can see that the animation timing has changed and it's trying to catch up with its regular speed. Hopefully you won't need to use this option, as I will try to provide pretty low poly characters to be animated, but it's important to know it. With Ctrl-Shift plus left click, you can select all the keys after or before the playhead. You can press B, click and drag, or just left click and drag to make a box selection. The timeline is mainly here to give you an overview of your animation. I never use it to work on my current keyframe. The summary line is just here to let me know if there are a keyframe on the current frame. Here we can see we have a keyframe on every single frame from 0 to 30. This keyframe belongs to different controller of our character and are stored into an action that is stored into the armature. We will discuss about armature later on. Here I just want to show you the hierarchy of the timeline. If I add a cube to the scene and add keyframes to this cube, you can see that now these keys are also displayed in the timeline. Selecting a key on the summary will select all the corresponding keys of the armature and the cube. This can be great to offset a whole set of keys. But if we want, we can only move, for example, the X location key of the cube. Another great feature of the timeline is that we can add markers. While you can use them only for organization's sake, they can be very useful to switch camera. When you add two cameras into your Blender scene and press 0 to go into camera view, you can switch from one camera to the other into the scene options. But if you will, you can go in the timeline and add a couple of markers. You can add them pressing M or going into marker, add marker. Now, with one of my cameras selected and one of the markers selected, I will go to marker and bind camera to marker. Now I will select the second marker, select the second camera, and repeat the process or press Ctrl B in the timeline. In the 3D viewport, pressing 0, I will jump into camera view, and when I will play the animation, each time I will hit those markers, Blender will automatically switch to the bound camera. This is way easier and cleaner than trying to animate the camera. To summarize, we have seen that navigating the timeline is close to navigating any Blender editors. We have seen a bunch of different shortcuts, and we have seen that we can create different markers in the timeline and bind multiple cameras to them so that we can jump from one camera to the other directly through the animation.